Hey YouTubers, I got another Ridgeline project for you today. I did this on my previous Ridgeline and it's a little bit of a nuisance. It takes a little time to do this mod, but it was well worth it and I enjoyed it every time I opened the trunk after dark. There's lights on the sides of the bed which are intended to both light the bed and illuminate the trunk. They don't do a great job illuminating the trunk to start with, and when you add a tonneau cover, the rails on the side only allow your trunk lid to open about 85–90% of the way. There's no problem accessing the trunk, but the lid blocks the lights that are in the bed, and so there's very little light that shines down in the trunk. And so what I did on my previous Ridgeline is I added a pair of lights to the trunk lid and I wired them to the original lights in the pickup bed. So whenever those lights come on, the trunk lights come on, and it worked out awesome. The hardest part, honestly, is I've got to take everything out of the trunk. Spare tire, everything. I need all that room to get up in there, and you'll see why in a minute. And I've got to remove the fender liner on this side, which there's, I think, 8 or 10 screws and bolts that have to come out of there, and then you've got to kind of fold the thing up. It's a little bit of annoying to deal with. Oh, and I'll have to remove the rear splash guard on that side. So it's a little bit annoying, but it's not really difficult. And I really only have to run 2 wires, a short one to ground the 2 lights, and then a long wire that I'm going to run out of the trunk into the rear fender and attach to this light right here. So here's the lights I'm using this time. They're a little bit different. This is what the box looks like, and I'll put a link to them. And these are a rigid plastic light. They actually have a little on-off switch on them, which might come in handy if I don't want the lights to come on. So I got a pair of these lights for $10 from Amazon, and you can see that they're quite bright. And I figured out where on here I want to mount them. And so I'm just going to jump in here and take you along for the ride. So here we go. Okay, here's the bare minimum you're going to need for tools for this project. We've got a number 2 Phillips screwdriver and a little short screwdriver that'll fit in tight spaces. I've got a 10mm socket. I prefer to use a 1/4 inch ratchet wrench rather than a 3/8 inch drive because it's smaller and gets into tight spots better. You'll need a sharp utility knife, some wire cutters, some needle nose pliers, zip ties, multi-strand wire that is at least as thick as the wires on your LED lights. There's no harm when going with something a little bit thicker. You'll need some electrical tape, and you'll need a way to make your wire connections. You can use butt splices. You can use these little crimp connectors. When you go to splice into your factory 12-volt wire inside the bed light, I prefer this type of connector. I think these are called Positaps. You slip your original wire in that gap. You see that little pin there penetrates the original wire. You strip some insulation off your new wire, pass the wire through here, put the frayed end of the wire there, and you tighten this up and it clamps everything down tight. These are a much better connection than these little blade type splices, so I recommend these. If you really want to do it right, the best way to do it is solder. If you solder your connections, they'll last forever. And I also like to use heat shrink tubing every time I can rather than electrical tape. So you need heat shrink tubing and a lighter. A couple of other upgrades will make your life a little easier. If you have one of these, you're all set. If you don't, I recommend them. I honestly don't know what this is called. I'll try and find a link to it and put it below the video. But this is just a tiny little ratchet that accepts your standard bit. And this can get into tight spots that this screwdriver can't. Another option for you, this little adapter goes on my 1/4 inch drive wrench. And it also uses the same standard hex bits. So again, it's shorter than a screwdriver and it's better than a screwdriver. So good, better, best. All right. You can strip the wires with a utility knife. I really recommend picking up a pair of these wire strippers. You can get these at Harbor Freight and they're not that expensive. And so if you've got this stuff, you're really set and you've got everything you need to do this job. So let's get started. Okay, I've got the wing nuts loosened up from the tire tray and I'm fixing to pull it out. I want to give you a little tip here. You see these little ledges across here? Those are designed to support the tire tray when you pull it back, so it just sits there like that. Okay, I've got the trunk emptied out and I'm kind of playing around with where I'm going to install the lights. Now the lights I put in my other truck were skinny and long and fit in this indentation right here. And these are a little bit more square shaped, and I think I'm going to put these up here. I kind of looked at the possibility of mounting them here, and this is not bad, but it lights the trunk more evenly from up here. So I'm going to put them here and here. And so, like I said, the trunk is empty. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and remove that fender liner and splash guard from this passenger side rear tire. Okay guys, to get the fender liner out of here, the first thing we're going to do is, if you have the factory splash guards, you'll need to remove that. And there's 4 screws for this. There's the 3 on the inside, and don't forget the 1 back here. So we pull those screws out and this just drops right out of place. Now, there are, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 more screws around this perimeter. All of them are right around here, and there's a couple here in front of the tire. We get all those screws out of the way. Then we've got 8 10mm bolts that look like this. Now, to get the screws out, I really like using a short little bit ratchet. It holds a standard hex bit here and can get into some tight spots. If you don't have one of those, if you can put a bit in your 1/4-inch drive socket, that'll work. And if you don't have that, you can probably get by with the stubby screwdriver. So I prefer the little 1/4-inch drive to get up in these little tight spots. And I've got an extension here, and it did come in handy for a few. And so this is just, it's time consuming. It's not difficult at all. It just, you got to find all the fasteners and take them out. All the screws are the same, all the bolts are the same. So that simplifies things. So I've got all the fasteners out. Now we're going to get the fender liner out. And this is just, it takes a little bit of time. We're going to push the fender liner inward to get it out of this lip here. And then we're going to kind of fold it up and pull it out. Okay, there's a rubber grommet on the side in front of the hinge on the right-hand side of the trunk. And we're going to run our wire alongside the existing factory wires and through that grommet where these wires exit the trunk. And so what I've done here is I've got my primary wire here, and I've soldered a short piece of, I believe this is a 14 gauge house wiring. So I've got this solid copper wire here that I'm going to push through that rubber grommet and then go underneath the truck and pull this on through, and I'm going to pull several feet through. And let's go ahead and get that done. Okay, there's our target grommet. And here's my wire. Just going to go, I like to go in on the front side of this. I'm just going to poke a little hole. There we go. And I'm going to reach this from up in this area, so I want to try to push this forward towards the front of the truck, where it'll be easier to grab from underneath. Okay, this is going to be a little shaky, but let me give you a peek at where the other side of that grommet is. So I'm underneath the truck in front of the rear wheel. You see there's our muffler and our gas tank there on the right. I'm going to come on up above this cross member. You'll see our little wire poking out. So I'm going to have to move the camera out of the way and reach my arm up there with a pair of pliers and grab that wire and pull it on through. Okay, so this wire is coming through that rubber grommet that's in the trunk right about there. And I've got the wire pulled forward in front of the cross member where it's coming out here in the fender well. I'm going to pass this right up through here. I'm going to come through this hole here. Kind of get this bent around where it'll come through there. There we go. And I'm just going to feed this wire on through. Make sure I don't have it looped around the fuel line or anything else in there. Okay, now you remember, we pulled this wire across here and fed it through this hole. I've added a grommet here to protect the wire where it passes through this sheet metal. I've got 2 zip ties here, and you'll see I've got a little drip loop, so if any water comes down here, it'll just drip off instead of going through the hole and down the wire. Also, I've got a drip loop where this wire comes down, has a loop in it, and goes up into the grommet into the trunk to keep any water from running down the wire and trying to get into the trunk. Now, it passes behind this brace here. Now, here is the back of the bed light. There's just not enough room to make the splice here, so I'm going to pull the bed light into the bed. I'm going to take the screws out and pull it in. I'm going to pass this wire in, and I'll do my splice inside the bed. Okay, there's one screw that we remove here, and then this light just pops out, and I've just pulled it into the truck. And here's my red wire that I've added, that I've run through the fender well. Now you'll see here on the back of the light there are 2 wires. One is a ground and one provides positive power for the light. Remember, this light is mounted on fiberglass, so it can't get a ground from the chassis. So we have a positive and a negative wire. What I'm going to do is peel back some of this insulation and tap my red wire into the positive wire for this light, and then wrap everything back up. So here's the plug for the bed light, and you can see I've pulled back the split loom and exposed the blue wire, which is the positive wire for this light, and I've spliced my red wire in there. I've got that soldered up. As soon as that cools off a little bit more, I'll wrap all that in electrical tape and then tuck everything back behind the split loom. All right, I've got my red wire spliced into the blue wire. I've tucked everything back into the loom, and I've wrapped everything securely in electrical tape from these contacts here all the way past where my red wire enters the split loom. So I'm just going to pop this back in now. Okay, time to put the fender liner back in. Now, don't forget, you've got a metal tab here. You've got the plastic tab from this fender trim. The fender liner goes in between those two. So it goes in front of the metal tab and behind this plastic tab. And so that's the hardest part, is getting those things in all the way around. Okay, when you go to put the liner back in, there are parts, for instance here, there's a plastic piece back here, and the liner has to tuck in behind this lip and in front of that plastic piece. And if you don't get it positioned right, it won't come over far enough. And it's like that all the way around, so just keep fiddling with it. When you get it in to where one of the bolt holes line up, just go ahead and loosely put a bolt in there. I mean very loosely, just a couple of threads, just so you don't lose the progress you've made. And just work your way around. I worked from back to front, and it seemed to work out pretty well, but you may have better luck front to back. But just keep working it until things line up. It's just, there's a lot of little places it's got to make a tight fit in between 2 pieces. So just keep at it and you will get it. I've got it now to where I can see all my bolt holes, and it looks like all my screw holes are lined up. So I'm just going to loosely put all my bolts in place and start working on those screws. Okay, there are 2 screws that go in behind the splash guard. There's one right here, and then the splash guard has a screw that goes in a little further back. So that goes in there, and this one right here goes in. The splash guard has screws here, 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 and here. So all the screws are in by hand. I'm just going around and snugging them up. Okay, so here is the light on the left-hand side, and I mounted it with double-sided tape. Used some 3M tape, not the tape that came with it. You see the wires go in here. I drilled a small 1/4-inch hole here. The wires come down, run across in here, and then they come out here. The ground for this light is over here, and I grounded it underneath this ground here. The positive wire comes over this way and meets the positive wire for the right light and the positive wire we ran through the fender earlier. So those three positives all join together behind this loom here. And then the two wires for the right light come up here. You can see I've got some little zip ties here to hold everything in place. Come up, come through here, and connect to this light. So both of the lights are mounted. So here's what the trunk looks like with just the factory bed lights. Now I'm going to turn on the new lights. Quite a difference. An added bonus is how much light the trunk lights throw on the tailgate. So if you're using the tailgate as a work surface, you have much better light with the trunk open now.